welcome and thank you for joining me. I'm Tom Laux, Communications Director for the City of Marshfield. And today we're going to talk about the Ethics Board. It's a brand new committee that's happening. And I have Ed Wagner, District 5 Alderman here with me to explain a lot about this board. Now, he is the guy that initiated this. He knows what it's about, and I think he really can answer our questions to help understand why we have an ethics board. So thank you for joining me.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
All right. Well, let's get right into it. When did this start, and why do you feel it was important to have an ethics board?
Well, I started working on it well over a year ago. And one of the reasons is, I was on the council for 12 years prior to my rejoining, prior to taking 2 years off and now rejoining. And basically there were things that would happen among appointed or elected officials that were questionable in terms of ethics. And if you look at the city's ethics policy or what was on the board, there really wasn't any way of handling that. There was an ethics code, a code of ethics itself, but there was no instructions for either other members of the council or for the public to make a complaint or to tell them what would happen when it did go through. So I started looking at it, and I found some examples, and then I talked to Steve Barg, and Steve sent me, I think, 7 examples of ethics ordinances. And the interesting thing about that was 3 of them were remarkably similar. They must have been like a cookie cutter. So it looked to me like it was a standard format. So I started pursuing that. And it's taken quite a while to get this through the Common Council. And finally it went through in November, and now we're ready to, I guess you'd call it, stand up the committee or the board and see what it would do.
Well, this is the first part of the process, and right now the council is looking at members at this point.
Right.
Let's just touch base on how that process is happening. Right now, it is January 21, and this is open until, I believe, February 3rd.
Right.
So let's explain the process if they would like to be a part of this board.
Okay, that's great. First of all, let's talk about the composition of the board.
Yeah, please.
Okay, the board itself would be three people plus an alternate. Okay, and basically the board wouldn't have any regularly scheduled meetings. They would be, the way it's written in the ordinances, they would meet on the call of the chair. And the chairman would only call a meeting if a complaint had been received from a citizen or from anybody pertaining to an elected or appointed official. The hired staff at City Hall are subject to the city's ethics ordinance under an employment law type of situation, and not the ethics board itself. So that's how it would work. Now, the way it's working now is people would send us a resume and a letter of interest, and they would submit it to Deb Hall, the city clerk, and Deb will compile these, and she will put them in a packet for the Common Council. And the Common Council she will also create a ballot with everybody's name on it, and the council will vote for 3 plus the alternate on the ballot. And the big question was, would we have anybody that would be interested in this? Oh my goodness, the interest has been really, really encouraging. Before we even announced that it was open to take applications, the day we passed it, or the day after we passed it, we had 2 people apply to the clerk's office already, and I've had 2 phone calls this morning since it's appeared on the news yesterday. So we're pretty happy the way this is going to go. Now, here's an interesting thing. I had to explain this to a lady that called this morning, and she said, well, who's the alderman who's going to be on that? The answer is there aren't any. There are no elected officials on this board. These are all citizens who have no ties or no political interest in the outcome of any particular ethics complaint. So we're looking forward to seeing a lot of people apply for this.
Yeah, definitely. Can you explain a little bit about how the terms are going to work if people want to do this? How long of a commitment is it for them if they were to get on the board?
It's going to be a 3-year term, but initially it'll be one 1-year term, one 2-year term, and 2 3-year terms. The 2 3-year terms, one of those will be the alternate, because as you lose members on the board, you'll want to carry over some institutional memory, and the alternate may move up to a full-time slot or whatever. So they can request, in their letter, they can request what length of term they'd like, or if it's just standard. If they don't say anything, we'll assume that they'll be up for a 3-year term.
Okay, so you're asking again for a resume, a letter of interest sent to our clerk, city clerk, Deb Hall.
Right.
And by February 3rd, and then the next step is again for the council to determine that. On
Right.
what date would they do that, or is it not be decided?
I think it was in the announcement
Okay.
that they were doing,
So-
but I don't remember the date exactly. I think it was February 9th.
Yeah, so that'll be the first council meeting of the month.
Right.
And they will be probably available then for you to make that decision and get a board together. Do you see a meeting then by who's ever the chair within yet by the spring of this year?
Well, I see some meetings for standing up, as we like to call it. And 2 things are going to happen. Number one, they're going to get a briefing by the city attorney, and the second thing, that we're going to be getting a briefing by city HR. And then the city attorney will go over the ordinance and the procedures in the ordinance, and that's something we'll need to talk about too. But they'll tell them how it works and what's expected of them, and how and what they can get from the city attorney and the HR director in terms of support as they need it as cases come up.
Okay, now people want more information that we're giving. There is an ordinance out there right now. They go to our city website, they go down on the homepage to our news section, and they can actually read the news release. There is a button there that goes to the ordinance that was created on this.
Oh, good.
So that will explain even more in depth. It is legal, but it is have a lot of information that you're talking about in
Right.
there, correct?
Well, yeah, and the thing that I had to explain is that we created this ordinance. There were several different ways we could have created the ordinance. We could have created the same committee. But the one, remember I said there were 3 ordinances that were remarkably similar? Well, they were put together in what I like to call a cookbook fashion. Okay? They instructed the committee on its duties and its procedures step by step by step. And that's in that ordinance. The ordinance spells it out step by step. And I think if you've seen it, you'll say, oh, it looks legal. Yeah, it does, because that's what it's all about. The thing that most people that I've talked to about it are surprised about is that everything before this board is almost it looks almost like a trial. It's really a quasi-judicial type of setting. And to make it even more official, the chairman of that committee has the power under the state statutes to subpoena people and documents and to take testimony under oath. So it does resemble a trial in many regards, and that's why the people who apply for this should know that they're going to be asked to make some really tough decisions, but they're going to be armed with the legal authority to make those decisions.
And instruction to do this, we're not really asking for a certain qualification on this, but there's going to be training held
Right.
by HAP
And yes.
and our HR and other means of getting information to them.
Yes.
Could be trainings involved. I believe it's in the ordinance, and that could be paid for by council decision. The trainings, I believe,
It
that's
could
in
be,
there.
yes, yes.
So it's not coming out of their pocket. I remember reading that in the ordinance.
Right.
So nobody's going in here will be on this board that's blind, steered blind.
That's correct. They're not going to be. We're not going to put them on the board and tell them they're on their own, and we're not going to make them a pincushion, I guess.
Let me ask you this. You saw a need for this. You came back here in the spring to our council.
Yeah. And
you have been probably watching these meetings and stuff on television as well as maybe online. And you've been seeing a need for this. Is that one of the reasons you came up with it, or are you just hearing it from others that it would be a good thing to do?
Well,
for us?
over the period of 12 years, there were a couple of instances where I felt there were things that needed to be reported. And we were left with no choice but to go to the district attorney. And you know how much the district attorneys like to deal with misdemeanors and ethics, or they don't. They just, to put it dearly, I mean, they're trying murderers and bank robbers and what have you. They really don't like to do this kind of thing. So really there was no avenue for getting it to be done. Oh, by the way, one thing I forgot to mention, that the ethics board is not on its own on the decisions it makes, because it actually doesn't make the decision about penalties. The council, they make a finding and recommendation to the council based on their investigation and trial, and then it goes to the council to make the decision. So there is a backup there. There's a fail-safe there too.
Yeah, that's great. I think that definitely explains that a lot easier for people to understand that it's not a total final decision, but the homework is being done by the ethics committee.
Yes.
That's really what you're
Yeah,
saying.
and making a recommendation.
And making a recommendation.
A finding. You know, we find this was true, we find this wasn't. You know.
But basically the council's the judge.
Right.
Really.
Right.
In a way.
In a way. Well, they determine if there's a chapter of the state statutes, Chapter 17, which allows the council to discipline elected and appointed officials. And it really gives them free range to do what they want, but at least the ethics board is making a recommendation.
One thing I just want to back up a little bit while we have a little bit of time is the understanding that maybe have came up earlier about an ethics committee is when maybe a council person has some vested interest in an item that might have to do with a decision made by the council. Is that part of it?
That could be. That could be. That could be if there was. I think the most likely case scenario for that would be where an older person knowingly withheld from the council that they had an interest in it, and then openly advocated for or against that without disclosing their interest in it. I think that's where the ethics committee would get involved. If it comes up, if something comes up before the council. Alderman Hendler did something on this not too long ago. He insisted that on committees that he served on, that one of the agenda items would be disclosure of conflicts of interest. And so and the idea there is to give an alderman the opportunity to say, I have an interest in this because of this. Do you want me to abstain or not? I had to use it myself. We were hiring a person, or we were negotiating for a lease with a non-governmental entity, and by virtue of the county board, I am appointed as a representative to that board, the board that was negotiating the lease. So I asked them for permission to abstain from the vote, so that I wouldn't have a conflict of two different committees and that sort of thing. And I've seen other aldermen do it too. Alderman Wetzel's done it once or twice. It's really quite it's a good thing to have. It gives us a way to absolve ourselves before the fact.
Yeah, and I thought that could be part of it, and then that could be helpful for an alderman or any elected person within our city. And this is just not for aldermen. This is for anybody on a commission.
Appointed to a committee or a commission. Yeah.
Yeah. So it could be anybody like on planning commission that are not really like you, right?
Right.
Can be part of this. So people have to know that when they actually either take an oath of office, right?
Right.
That this is going to be happening, just so they're aware of it.
Sure. And I think one of the objections that some of the council had to this ordinance was, you're going to scare people off. No, I think we're going to get people who want to serve their community in the highest and best fashion. I really think there's no there. I said in the ordinance or in the press release that the success of city government depends on the amount of trust that the community has in their government. And I want to make sure we've got some trust.
I agree.
Especially with current events.
Yes, I agree. Anything that you want to still bring up? We are going to talk to Steve Bard here on this as well and get his perception on a few things as the city administrator, but I don't want to miss anything from you, Ed.
No, I think I've covered about all of it, unless you can think of something that.
No, but you know, it's open right now as we tape this on the 21st, and anybody can apply. That can send a resume and letter to the clerk, and then that decision will happen with the council on the 9th. So,
I believe it is the 9th, yeah.
So we'll hear here from our city administrator, Steve Barg, a little bit about the ethics committee from his perspective. And I think that'll help us round out why this is happening and why it's here. Help people, if they do want to apply, help them with a better decision to do that. So thank you, Ed, for coming by. And next up, we'll talk to City Administrator Steve Barg.
Well, I think the Ethics Board is a really good idea, Tom. I mean, we have a lot at stake at City Hall, a lot of big decisions that are made by our elected officials, and then recommended, in some cases even authority given to to appointed officials, like committees, boards, and commissions. And we really need to make sure that they're not getting themselves into places that could be problematic for themselves and the city.
Can you tell me your role in this this board?
Well, really, I'm kind of, as administrator, I'm sort of involved in a lot of things, broadly speaking. In this case, not a whole lot directly. Jennifer Rakew, the Human Resources Director, and I will certainly provide assistance to the board as we can, as will be helpful. I know that Jennifer will be, helping, I believe, with some training along with the city attorney to get the board acclimated in their duties, their roles, expectations, and the boundaries. But for the most part, once the board gets going and when they're trained, they will probably be fairly self-policing, if you will.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Anything else you wanted to mention as a city administrator about this board that I may have left out that you would like to bring to our attention?
Well, could I talk about the duties briefly?
Yeah,
maybe we're going to get into that anyway. But one of the things that's exciting about this board, a lot of people think that if a person has done something that's borderline, could be a problem, they're going to review it to see if it's an ethical violation. That's true. But the bigger thing is we're going to encourage people on the council and on our committees, boards, and commissions, if they have any concern at all. Maybe it's my brother-in-law works for that company, and I'm going to be voting on this, and I'm kind of involved with the company myself. I'm a part owner or whatever it is. They can come forward on a proactive basis and actually bring it to the board and say, could I get a ruling in advance before I ever have to deal with this issue? Sort of a preemptive attempt to make sure that I don't get into a bad place that I'd regret. So that's the part that people aren't talking about as much, but the proactive part about getting some sort of an advanced opinion could be very helpful.
All right. You deal with employees. That's your job. This committee, sorry for saying committee, but board, will not deal with anything in employee issues. Is that correct?
That's correct. In fact, initially it was talked about when Ed Wagner, who is the chairman of the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee, came forward with this idea. And I give Ed a lot of credit for this. But initially, I believe he had in there that it would apply to employees too. The problem is, the employees report through the internal organization, and they report to me and the HR director and their department heads. The problem is if you had an unelected board trying to take some sort of actions against city employees, you'd kind of be crossing a line that's not really appropriate. And so, as part of the discussions with the city attorney and Chairman Wagner, that was pulled out. So the employees will continue to be dealt with as far as ethical problems or concerns internally to the employment situation.
All right. Well, earlier with Ed, we spoke about how a decision will be final. And our ethics board, just for those that may have tuned in just a bit late, what does that mean? They will cast a vote and then it'll go to council?
Yeah, if they believe that there's reason to consider that there was an ethical violation, they'll actually hold a hearing. And ultimately, if they find cause in their mind, probable cause per se, not the way police officers talk about probable cause, but that an ethical violation occurred, they can then write a report with a recommendation and send it to the council and suggest that the council take it up and take whatever action might be appropriate. Now you say, what might that be? It could be any number of things that the council finds appropriate. It could be censuring the person, could be other types of actions. The other thing is, if they find reason to believe that maybe a criminal offense took place, they would then forward that to the district attorney. We expect that to be rare, obviously, but we want to make sure that we're not trying to account for things that really aren't the purview of this board. We want to get those in the hands of the people who deal with those types of violations if they occur. But for the most part, it would be a report and recommendation to the council saying, we feel a violation has occurred here. We want you to consider possibly taking some action.
Will those meetings take place just like a regular meeting, an open or closed session at that time?
The hearings?
Yes.
I have to look back at the ordinance. I apologize. I think that might be a closed event with just the people involved because of the nature of it. But again, we don't want to make this appear in general to be a process that the world sees it as secret. Who are these people? What are they doing? What's going on? But you get into some circumstances where you want to be able to deal with things in the most confidential and appropriate manner that you can.
All right. Well, thanks for coming by, Steve. Appreciate it very much. And I hope everyone got to understand why this board was created with both Steve Barg, our city administrator, as well as Ed Wagner, District 5 Alderman, talking about this earlier in the program.
Thanks, Tom. And I would invite anybody who has questions, to give me a call at City Hall, and I'd be glad to talk to you about it. When I do, I'll probably have the ordinance and some other things in front of me just to make sure, because we're all learning this as we go along. But we trust that this will be a good thing for the city and help give the residents more confidence in the fact that we're looking at these types of issues.